A semi-crime. It is like this. With the thought of preserving the caliphate, which is the central and binding point for the spheres of Islam, and with the idea that after realizing his past social flaws, the late Sultan, the esteemed Abdul Hamid Khan, would feel remorse and be prepared to receive advice, and thinking that the most sound way is reconciliation, I considered the conflict that transpired, which was to become the origin and seedling of indignations and animosity, in a much more positive light. So I wrote to the former Sultan by means of a newspaper article saying, "Turn the deemed Yıldız Palace into a university, so that it becomes lofty like the Pleiades. Instead of travelers and menacing people, settle the people of truth and angels of mercy in it, so it becomes paradisical. Return the wealth the nation has gifted you in the palace back to the nation by alleviating its foremost sickness of ignorance. Investing in large religious universities. Rely on the love and generosity of the people of this nation, because the nation is the guarantor of your royal authority. After such time of life, one is required to think only of the hereafter. Abandon this world before the world abandons you. Spend the zakat of your life on the way of your second life." Let us now make a comparison. The Yıldız should either be a venue for entertainments or a university. It should either be for tourists or the training of scholars. It should either be stolen or presented as a gift. Which is better? Let the fair-minded judge. As for me, I am a beggar. I gave advice to a great sultan, thus I committed a semi-crime. The time has not yet come to tell the remaining half of this crime. Note, the time to divulge that half was 15 years later, which was the reason behind the author's 28-year imprisonment. It can be referred to in the matter discussed at the end of Risale-i Nur. You will understand exactly the other half of the crime. Alas, what a shame! The people of this nation were longing and thirsty for the happiness that lied in the constitutional system, together with the modern education system compliant with Islam as the basis of our social lives. Yet, the nation's demand was unfortunately hampered by those who were extremist in their views and mixed malice to the idea of the constitution and with the irreligious, negligent behavior of those whose minds were enlightened. Those who have placed this impediment should lift it. This is an appeal on behalf of the nation. O Pashas and officers, witnesses of these 11.5 crimes are in the thousands. In fact, half of Istanbul can attest to some of them. While I accept the punishments to these 11.5 crimes, I also demand the answers to my 11.5 questions. In return for this fault of mine, I have a merit. I will say it like this. I openly opposed the branch of despotism here, which demoralized everyone and made them lose a good spirit. It created feelings of animosity and partisanship and caused division through the establishment of racialist societies. Its label was constitutionalism, but carried the meaning of tyranny and smeared the name unity and progress. Everyone has some kind of opinion. Thus, what is needed is general peace and amnesty and the invalidation of any privileges, so that, using some kind of privilege, one does not look down at another as vermin and thus sow dissension. I say without boasting, we are true Muslims. We can be deceived, but will never deceive anyone. We will never stoop to lie for a life in this world, for we understand that إنما الحيلة في ترك الحيلة. The best trickery is to abandon trickery. However, since I have sworn my allegiance to the legitimate and true designation of a constitutional system, no matter what form tyranny takes, even if it is dressed or labeled in constitution, I will deliver it a slap wherever I come across it. I think the enemies of the constitution are those who, by showing it to be cruel, repugnant, and contrary to the Sharia, increase the number of people who also oppose consultation, meshwara. The truth does not change by the changing of labels. Since the greatest mistake is for a person is to suppose they have no mistakes, I admit that my mistake was that I wanted to make people follow my advice before I heeded the advice of the people. Having tried to deliver guidance to the people before guiding my own nafs, I made the call to the commandments of Allah ineffective and thereby abased it. Moreover, it has been established through experience that punishment is the consequence of a fault. Sometimes that fault manifests itself as being in connection with a fault that has not been committed. And although innocent, that person receives a sentence for punishment. Allah grants this calamity, imprisons him, and delivers justice, while the judge unfairly charges him and commits an injustice. O political leader, I had an honor and good name with which I was to serve the nation of Islam. You shattered it. I had a superficial fame that formed itself and which was not to my liking. With it, I was able to influence the masses with my advice. To my satisfaction, you destroyed it. Now I have an ineffectual life which I am tired of. Let me be damned if I feared the gallows. Let me be known as a coward if I do not walk laughing to death. My apparent sentencing will culminate in the condemning of your consciences. This will be a state of fame for me, not disrepute. You have, however, caused harm to the people, for you have shattered the effects of my advice. Secondly, it is harmful for your own selves, for my case will become a decisive proof in the hands of your opponents. You have tried me on the touchstone. I wonder how many of the people you consider as part of these so-called genuine groups would come out with integrity if they tried with such a touchstone. If constitutionalism consists of the tyranny of a group and is contrary to the Sharia, then فَلْيَشْهَدِ الثَّقَلَانِ أَنِّي مُرْتَجِئُونَ. Note, I hold the whole world, the humans and jinns, as witness that I am a reactionary. That is, a unity based around falsities is a lie, and it is corrupt to build the notion of constitutionalism on corruption. The true meaning of constitutionalism will forever be established on justice, truth, and the absence of privileges. Under ordinary conditions, the thunder and terrible storm recorded in history as the 31st March incident had prepared the grounds for such potential tyranny that while it should have resulted in doom and destruction, the words uttered by the protesters before Allah was the name of the Sharia, which continues to demonstrate its miracle. Having come out of that storm lightly, it condemns before Allah the newspapers printed after the middle of April, because the truth will be manifested once the 7 matters and the 7 states that have led to these events are carefully examined. They are as follows. 1. 90% of them were against the Committee of Unity and Progress, and the whole movement was a stance against their oppression and tyranny. 2. It was to make changes to the parliamentarians who were at the center of partisan disputes. 3. It was to save the wronged sultan from his inevitable overthrow. 4. It was to suppress the opposing ideas arising from the passions of the military and their religious morality. 5. It was to find the perpetrators of the blown-up murder of the murderers who killed Hasan Fehmi Bey. 6. It was to protect those who were excluded as personnel and the regiment officers from being unjustly treated. 7. It was to forbid the scope of freedom to include dissoluteness and limit it with the morality of the Sharia and the fulfillment of the principle of qisas and the cutting off of the hand which the populace associate as the political aspect of the Sharia. Nevertheless, the surface was a swamp, the trap had been laid, and the plan was already underway. The sacred discipline of the military had been sacrificed. The fundamental reason was the partisan and malicious disputes by the factions and the exaggeration, lies, and utter confusion used by the newspapers instead of eloquence. In these 7 demands, just as the color white is only visible when the 7 colors are whirled, it was only the white light of the Sharia that manifested and formed a barrier against the forces of corruption. I say with all my strength that our progress is only through the progress of our nation, which is Islam and the manifestation of the truths of the Sharia. Otherwise, we will show the truth of the proverbial saying, "He quit his stride and could not learn the stride of another." Indeed, we should be attuned by the honor and glory of the nation of Islam and the reward of the hereafter and patriotism and Islamic zeal and the love of country and the love of religion. O Pashas and officials, I request you impose the penalties on my crimes and that you provide here the answers to my questions. Since Islam is the greatest humanity and the Sharia the most virtuous of civilizations, the world of Islam is destined to become the ideal city envisaged by Plato. First question. Note: these questions led to the release of 40 to 50 prisoners. What is the penalty for the gullible who, through the deception of newspapers, considered it the uprising to be legitimate and went along with the general current and custom? Second question. If a person took on the form of a snake, or a wali was dressed as a thief, or the constitution took the form of tyranny, what will be the penalty for those who attack it? Maybe they are in fact snakes, thieves, or tyranny. Third question. Can tyranny only be restricted to a single individual? Can it not be that multiple persons can be tyrannical? I believe power should lie with the law. Otherwise, tyranny would be curved up, and revolutionary committees would thrive rapidly. Fourth question. Is it more harmful to execute an innocent person or to forgive 10 criminals? Fifth question. Is it not the case that physically suppressing the people of trade and thought, as well as being ineffective, would lead to increased dissension and discord? Sixth question. How can the unity of the nation, which is the foundation of our social life, be achieved if not for the abolishment of privileges? Seventh question. While it may appear just to apply the complete law by violating the rule of equality and restricting its application to only some groups, can it not in one respect be deemed to be oppression and rancor? Moreover, while the innocence of the 80% of most of those in prison have been established with them being indemnified and released, would it not constitute animosity that the idea of revenge in the view of the general populace if this situation prevailed? I have nothing to say to the military court. let the informants be concerned. 8th question. If a group perceived itself as privileged and it forcefully made everyone appear to be against the Constitution by continuously provoking everybody's sensitivities, and if everyone ended up reacting with this obstinate tyranny, operating under what they themselves labeled as constitutionalism, who should bear the blame? 9th question. If a gardener opened the gates to the garden and permitted everyone to enter it, who should be blamed if the garden is damaged? 10th question. If people are called to trial after the granting of freedom of thought and speech, would that not amount to being a plan to bring harm to this hapless nation? If it was not like this, could it not be imagined that another pretext could be used to carry out such a plan? 11th question. Everyone swears by constitutional governance. What happens if one opposes or falls silent at those opposing the meaning of the Constitution? Would some kind of atonement not be required? Would it not make liars out of the people of this nation? And would it not make public opinion, which is innocent, be deemed as lying, senile, and fickle? To conclude, due to ignorance, what is prevalent now is an extreme form of tyranny and oppression. It is as though despotism and spying have become reincarnated, and the purpose was not to reclaim freedom from Sultan Abdul Hamid, but it was rather to multiply and magnify what was a minor and lesser form of tyranny. Semi-question. If someone was to come out and say about a man who had such a delicate and weak body that he was unable to bear the bite of mosquitoes and bees and could barely scatter them in fear, his intention is not to get rid of the mosquitoes, but to alert the big lion and make it pester him. Which fool could he dupe by saying this, I wonder? The other half of the question I am not permitted to disclose. O Pashas, officers, I say with all my strength that I am forever persistent on the general truths I have published in all my articles. Supposing that history had summoned me to the justice of the Sharia, to the court of the era of bliss of our Prophet, I would present to them the exact same truths I have published. At most, I would dress it up in the prevailing fashion of those times. And supposing I was summoned by the future to the critical court of the minds of 300 years from now, together with patching the cracks of its breadth and development, I would once again present the same truths there in a refreshed way. That is, reality does not change, the reality is truth. الحق يعلو ولا يعلى عليه. The nation has awakened. If the nation is misled by way of inflammatory and contriving statements, it will no longer remain. The life of an imagination which is assumed to be true is short-lived. The blaze of public thought will disperse the facetious and misleading ideas and reveal the truth, inshallah. The state of your torturous imprisonment was such that the time was terrible, the place was brutal, the inmates were savage, the journalists were mischief makers, thoughts were scattered, hearts were in anguish, consciences were saddened in despair. The officials would initially take pleasure at the misfortunes of others, and the guards would agitate. But since my conscience was clear, that state was as though entertainment for me. For me, the variety of calamities had begun to feel like musical melodies. Moreover, I have completed here in the school my lesson I had received last year in the mental institution. In the longevity of disaster, I took long lessons. Through the sorrows of the innocent and oppressed, which are the spiritual pleasures of the world, I have learned the lesson of showing compassion to the weak and to nurture extreme hostility to cruelty. I have strong hopes that the evaporating cries rising from the fervent sorrows of so many innocent hearts, those woes and the lamentations will rise to form a cloth of mercy. And with the establishment of the new Islamic states of the world, of Islam, those cloths filled with mercy have already begun to form. And if this civilization is to lay ground for such undignified transgressions and slanders that lead to dissent and ruthless ideas of vengeance, and ascetic wiles of inflammatory statements and such neglectful attitudes in religion, then I hold all to witness that, in place of that so-called civilization's palace of bliss, in which animosity festers, I prefer the untamed and nomadic tents on the high mountains of the eastern provinces, in which lie the fields of absolute freedom. The freedom of thought, freedom of speech, goodwill, and peace of heart that I am yet to see in this debased civilization is prevalent across the mountains of the eastern provinces in perfect fashion. According to my knowledge, riders are meant to be mannerly. Yet, I see some mannerless newspapers spreading animosity. If such is their level of manners, and if public opinion is thus convoluted, bear witness that I have given up on such literature. I have no connection with this either. I will return to the mountain tops of my hometown, that is, of Mount Bashit, and study the stars and inscriptions in the skies instead of the newspapers. Pure is our space of effulgence from the blemish of indebtedness. To renounce the ranks of the lofty and the low is for us an eternal blessing. We are withdrawn from the drunkenness of ambitions and burning desires. We are so obsessed that we have turned down the union with our beloveds. A warning: my resigning from the so-called civilization will leave you pondering. Indeed, I prefer to remain a Bedouin than to adhere to a civilization that is blended with tyranny, dissoluteness, and debasement. This civilization will lead individuals into a wretched and dissolute state. However, since true civilization is to serve the progress and perfection of humankind and to bring into actuality the human nature that remains in potentiality, to desire civilization with this perspective is to desire humanity. Moreover, the reason for my enthusiasm and desire for a constitution as an ideal is that the foremost gateway to the future progress of the world of Islam and of Asia lie in the freedom within constitutionalism and the domain of the Sharia, and the key to the fortune and ascension of Islam lies in the consultation within constitutionalism. Indeed, until present, 370 million Muslims have been crushed under the spiritual tyranny of foreign powers. Today, when the sovereignty of Islam reigns over the world, and in particular Asia, each and every Muslim will possess a true share in that sovereignty. And freedom is the one and only solution to deliver 370 million Muslims from slavery. Even if we suppose that to establish this freedom, a population of 20 million have suffered great losses, let them be sacrificed. We will give 20 and receive 300 in return. Alas, what a shame! The nations and races within us are mixed like the air. They have not blended like water. Inshallah, as a result of the blending of the energy of the truth of Islam and the resultant power arising from the enlightenment with the knowledge of Islam, a balanced manner of justice will be instituted. Long live legitimate constitutionalism! Blessed be the illuminated freedom, completely molded and developed upon the basis of the truths of the Sharia. Bediüzzaman Said Nursi. Bediüzzaman did not stay long in Istanbul and left for one. While traveling on the route through Batum, he stopped by Tiflis and climbed the hill known as the Sheikh San'an overlooking the city. While looking over the surrounding view, a Russian policeman approached and the following discussion took place. "What is it that you are looking at so carefully?" Bediüzzaman said, "I am planning my madrasa." The Russian policeman asked, "Where are you from?" Bediüzzaman, "I am from Bitlis." The Russian policeman, "This is Tiflis." Bediüzzaman, "Bitlis and Tiflis are brothers." The Russian policeman, "What do you mean?" Bediüzzaman, "In Asia and the world of Islam, 3 lights are beginning to be revealed one after the other. While with you, 3 levels of darkness will start to recede one over the other. This veil of despotism will one day be torn down and dwindle, and I will come back to build my madrasa here." The Russian policeman, "How unfortunate for you. I am surprised at how helpful you are." Bediüzzaman, "And I am surprised at your reasoning. Could it ever be possible for this winter to continue indefinitely? Each winter has a spring, and each night has a day." Russian policeman, "The Islamic world has been carved up into pieces." Bediüzzaman, "They have gone to study. Here is India, one of the able sons of Islam. He is studying in the high school of the British. Egypt, a clever son of Islam, he is taking lessons from the civil service of the British. Caucasia and Turkestan, 2 valiant sons of Islam, they are training in the Russian War Academy, and so on. So, do you not see that after receiving their diplomas, each of these noble children will lead a continent and will rise the flag of their mighty and just father, Islam, on the horizons of perfection? They will thereby proclaim before Qadar the mystery of the eternal wisdom in humanity by overcoming all the odds fate has in store for them." After arriving in one, he visited tribes and gave them guidance on matters of society, civilization, knowledge, and life. He later published a book about this called Munazarat, Debates, which was in the style of questions and answers. The conversations Bediüzzaman had here with the people of politics on the one hand and the common people on the other are indeed intriguing. In all of this, however, it is clear that the sole aim of this man was to spread the light of Islam and truths of the Qur'an across the world. He had lived his life to fulfill his duty as proclaimer of the Qur'an.